statistical, so unpredictable, here on SNL Stats.
Yes, that is right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of SNL Stats. I am so excited for this episode. I've been waiting weeks to talk to this guy, and I'm sure if you're clicking on the show, whether it's on YouTube or any podcatcher, you see in the title of our show, we are going to be speaking today with the director of Saturday Night Live, Don Roy King, and I am so thrilled about it. Let me introduce our panel that we have here today to talk with Don. First up, he is an SNL podcaster and one of the most incredible people we speak to on any of our roundtables, always has excellent insight on any of the episodes. Rich Tackenberg, how are you?
I am good. Don, I hope you had dinner and a beverage because I've got about 6,000 questions for you, but I'll pick the top 10. I'm so excited to be doing
I've got
this.
some vitamin water. That's
Perfect. Perfect.
Exactly. Joining us also, we have James Stevens. James is an SNL memorabilia collector and a historian. You know, if you ever want to talk SNL, James is your guy because he knows everything there is to know about the show. James, how are you?
Well, I don't know if I know everything, but I am well. I am currently half vaxxed, but by Thursday I will be fully vaxxed. So that is good. And I am also excited that we have the incomparable, the esteemed, the humble, the Emmy Award-winning Don Roy King here today.
And the old and fully vaccinated director of Saturday Night Live.
Well, that's great to hear, Don. And yeah, let me formally introduce you. So he has been the director of Saturday Night Live since 2006. He has directed an incredible amount of live television. If you think of live TV, Don Roy King's name is synonymous with live TV. He is a multi-time Emmy winner, and it is really such an honor to get to speak to you. Don Roy King, how are you?
I'm terrific. I'm thrilled to be introduced that way. Thank you.
Oh, honestly, the world has been so crazy over the last couple years that just sitting down and having a conversation, talking about Saturday Night Live with anyone even remotely involved with the show is just such a privilege given everything that's been happening. So really thank you for your time, and let's dive right in. So really the first question I have for you is over the last couple of years, the world has gotten kind of crazy, and going into SNL at home at the end of season 45, and then you find out you're going to be back in the studio for 46. What was your mindset at the start of the season?
Well, to back up to the end of last season,
sure.
When the announcement was made that we were going to shut down the live shows, I was disappointed like everyone else. But then out of nowhere, got the word that Lauren had decided we were going to do a couple of remote shows. And I thought, that can't be a good idea. I rarely disagree with a Lorne Michaels decision, but I thought this one sucks. First of all, there'll be no direction. The cast members and editors will take over. Cast members will be doing stuff from home. They've never shot themselves before. They won't know how to light it. They won't know how to mic it. There'll be no audience. There'll be no band. This will be a pale imitation of Saturday Night Live. And I said, look, I've got a great idea. Why don't we just continue to do the show, but fill the audience with people who have already contracted the disease? And I said, they can't make each other any sicker, and they could use the diversion. And I'll be down the hall in a locked control room. Apparently, the cast and crew did not see it my way, so we did, in fact, shut down. And we did, in fact, do 3 remote shows that I had almost nothing to do with. I sent around an email with some suggestions about lighting and miking and shooting and angles. And then I realized that most of our cast came up that way, doing their own little videos with great YouTube experience, and they know how to do that. And of course, we do field pieces all the time, remarkable little 5-minute movies that are done at the same time we're doing preparation for the live show. And those things are remarkable too. Well, that memo, I guess, got read a few times by a few cast members, but did nothing about it because they know how to do it. And I sat back and watched the first show, and I thought, it's not bad. It's watchable. It's funny. It's topical, and it does sort of look like Saturday Night Live. 2 weeks later, they did another one that was incredibly better in terms of production values, and I was so impressed with that. And then the third one was better still. And I wrote them all in the email saying, I have never been more proud of a show that I had nothing to do with, because it was pretty good television, and it was pretty close to what we do, and certainly kept us alive in terms of the topicality of what was happening in the world. And I was eager to get back to the studio for selfish reasons, in addition to show reasons. So when we decided we were coming back with major changes in procedure and protocol and in placement of people and the use of people, it was, and quite frankly still is, a major hurdle every week. It's different and it's harder, and yet I think we've continued to turn out a television show that looks very much like Saturday Night Live has for 46 years, and I'm proud of that part too.
It's really unbelievable, because we had no idea. We podcast with a lot of journalists and different people who have watched the show for, over 40 years. And they, no one knew what they were going to see when the thing started back up in October. And it really was incredible to watch Saturday Night Live look like Saturday Night Live when you see, sports looking so different. Some of them have to go to a bubble environment. And to see SNL, I mean, the production and everyone who made an effort to make SNL look like SNL, it's really, really incredible. So I guess what I want to know is this been the most challenging year for you at the show, given all the changes in protocols that you mentioned?
Yes. Most challenging on several levels, including the fact that we have to limit the amount of time the cast can spend on set. So I block sketches with stand-ins who are just hired actors who come in to play roles, and we put little signs over their necks that show what cast member they're playing that day, and they go through some basic blocking, and then we bring the cast out and as quickly as possible teach them the blocking. It slows things down, and it makes some things more difficult. I don't have an assistant in the control room, so all of the script changes that happen straight through dress rehearsal and occasionally in the middle of the air show, all of those script changes I used to quickly mark down, give to the assistant. She would go back and duplicate them to give to the technical director and the associate director. And we don't have that person anymore. Just the meeting with the camera operators has changed things significantly. We have limited number of stagehands who can make changes, and so that limits how many sets we can use or how big they can be. We have the band wasn't allowed to all be on set, and we therefore have half the band in Jimmy Fallon's studio, and that is that's a whole different game too.
Right.
We initially were told that the musical guests couldn't have any more than 5 people on the music stage. So we built out the music stage just to give a little more acreage and allow a few more people up there. But we still managed to squeeze in some dance numbers and some big production on that music stage too. It's been harder. And what often happens, and this is human nature too, what we do this week is therefore assumed what we can do every week, or maybe it's assumed that that's the base level, and then we can add on to that, so that if we just go through a nightmarish sense of hurdles to get something that was requested by a writer on the show one week, the next week a writer's going to say, well, wait a minute, well, you did that for him last week. Why can't you do a little bit more for us this week? And so it piles up, and Lorne, who's primary driven goal is to make it the best show it can be, is not likely to say, we got to cut back, guys. And so there's not much cutting back, and that puts a little more burden on us. But it's an amazing team, and all of those team members are there to just fulfill the vision of Lorne and those writers, and to make the show the best it can be. And it's watchable, and I'm proud of it.
It's really unbelievable. And you know, Rich, James, I'm living by every single word that Don is saying, because it's just so incredible. So I want you guys to jump in here with your questions as well. Right now, you know, we're talking about everything that's happening this season, but we're going to get to, you know, everything, you know, questions about, you know, when you first started as a director, and we'll talk about those things later in the show for all of our listeners who want to hear some of that. But let's, you know, continue with our talk about season 46. So Rich, James, if you guys want to jump in with some questions for Don.
Yeah. Oh God, I've got 80 from just what he said. This is so interesting. I'm wondering though, when you look at, because I'm guessing from what you said that this year is probably the most dramatic change to the production of the show since you've been there, maybe in 46 years. It's like, I feel like it's like the batters practicing with the weights on their bats. So when you can come back, whenever that day is, where there's all the protocols are lifted and it's back to business as usual, is there anything you feel like you and your team has learned this year that you would want to take into that non-COVID production of Saturday Night Live?
Mm-hmm. My answer to that question is a little bigger in focus. And it has to do with storytelling in general. Early on in the pandemic, I watched a play that was done by the Public Theater in New York. It's a play in the series about the same family in upstate in Rhinebeck, New York, and just brilliant observations about the current times. And I had seen them all at the Public Theater, and sort of fell in love with his family, and felt like I was going to spend Thanksgiving with him, and I love that connection. And then I read that they were going to try to do a Zoom version of the family, and I thought, boy, that's not going to be what a disappointment that will be. And I sat here in my living room watching in these little boxes with the characters spread out in different places, and I was all by myself. There was no audience. It was a tiny little screen, and yet it was just as viable and just as compelling as any of those productions I had seen on stage. And I realized that this is probably the kind of conversation that happened 70 years ago, when people sat around in a conference room and somebody said, you know, these engineers just developed this thing called television. And we're supposed to come up with some way to tell stories through this medium. And I'll bet there were a lot of them that said, we can't do that. It's a fuzzy little black and white pictures in a box, and we won't hear the audience. There's no live band. You can't tell stories that way. And there was someone else in that room who said, you know something? Let's make a hat where there never was a hat. Let's give it a shot. And sure enough, 70 years later, it is a viable medium. It's not the same as watching live theater or watching big screen movie, but it is storytelling, and it can be just as important and make people laugh and clap, just like any other medium for storytelling. And I thought, you know, instead of saying, when are we going to get back to normal? When are we going to get back to do things the way we did it before? Why don't we say, the question is, how can we use what we've been forced into learning to tell stories in other ways? And maybe there will be not just live theater and movies and television. That maybe there'll be a Zoom channel. Maybe there'll be a whole new way to reach people at home and touch their hearts and make them think and care and cry. And so this is close to me, because my daughter is graduating in 1 month from Carnegie Mellon University as a theater directing major.
Wow.
And to many people, that it means like she's coming out with a degree in typewriter repair. because theaters are closed and she's graduating into an industry that doesn't exist right now. But in this period of time, she's made theater that was remarkable. She did live Shakespeare at Carnegie Mellon in the streets of Pittsburgh. She did a Zoom play called Arlington that was partly taped and partly live, and integrated people all over the world in this amazing intimate production. And she just did a senior project, which was Assassins, an amazing musical, and she turned it into a combination radio play and book. So you open the book and you see pictures of the cast members dressed as John Wilkes Booth, and some of the lyrics and just remarkable graphic design while you're hearing the songs. And I thought, this is a different way of telling stories. And she only learned how to do that because of this pandemic.
Oh my God, that's great. Is there anything from this season? No, it's super interesting. I'm wondering now, taking it back to this season, is there anything that, while the audience may have gone, sure, that was Saturday Night Live, to you it was like, oh, that sketch, that monologue, that whatever musical performance was so differently produced or directed because of COVID and we don't know? Is there anything that you remember from this year that sticks out to you?
I would say just the opposite. There were so many things that were much different in how they were arrived at. But I thought, man, that's just like it always was, or that just had the same feel. It just the audience reaction. You know, we have a third of the audience, but the laughter is still as full and as vibrant and as motivating as when it was a giant full room of people. We're not augmenting it in any way. It's just those people are alive and amused and engaged, and it seems to work. And inevitably, I'll say, man, that was just like we used to feel. It was a higher mountain to climb to get there, but it was it still feels like it's important television on several levels. And
Don, I was going to ask a little bit about the protocols. In addition to those being a challenge, you had this additional challenge of having, what was it? 3 or 4 shows in a row was the maximum forever. And then this year there was 6, in that early time of year. And then you did 5 when you guys came back after the start. I mean, how like grueling. I mean, I don't know what my question is other than like, you're being thrown all these other protocols and procedures. I would imagine that at the end of a 5 or 6 run week, you guys just have to feel exhausted, right?
I will say the only advantage I have in the time I've been there is that I've gotten a little bit thicker skinned and a little more have the ability to pace a little better. So the 6th, to me, wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. However, it's a grueling grind for the writers, and that's a hard job, and they start to burn out fast, especially after your best sketch gets rejected in the 3rd read through, and then, man, I got to start from scratch. I've got to come up with something for next week, and it's a host I don't even know, and I feel for them. That's a tough road, and they were limping to the finish line at the end of 6.
Well, and before we walk completely away from the COVID protocol thing, and I only know this because I haven't spoken to you earlier this season, but these protocols are in place because of safety and health and all this stuff. And again, don't want to make a huge deal about it, but I learned from you were out sick earlier this season. And I think you mentioned to me that it was during the Jason Bateman show, I think. I'm just curious, would you be able to tell us a little bit about how, the team sort of covers that the show must go on mentality?
They covered the show must go on mentality so much better than I wish they had.
Little job security issue there.
Oh man, I thought this is way too good, and they don't miss me at all. They set up here. Actually, they delivered stuff that I set up of a screen and a feed so that I could see all 5 cameras straight through the rehearsal period. And I had all audio connection, and I could talk to the Michael Mancini, my AD, who did the actual. And I blocked every sketch, and I watched the music in a split screen version and blocked the music guest. But when it came down to really staying with the action, calling the shots, and dealing with all of the changes, it was out of my hands. And once again, it was a show that was worth watching that I did not have much to do with. But I was back the following week.
Well, yeah, it's great to hear that you're in great health now, and that, you know, everything, you know, went through without a speed bump, despite you saying that people, you know, you kind of wish it didn't, as a joke. But I really wanted to start with season 46 because I think that's, you know, top of mind. That's what all our listeners are thinking about, this monumental pandemic season. But I also wanted to ask you about where your head was at when you first got the job. So going back to 2006, when you took over for Beth McCarthy-Miller, were you a big fan of Saturday Night Live? Was that something that you really felt like this was a monumental step in your career that was like, oh, wow, now I've made it? Was that how it felt for you? And we kind of want to get like into the psychology of it.
It was monumental. And it was certainly, when it first came up, I thought, there is no show in the world I would rather direct than that. It is the ultimate for a live television director. It's a little bit of everything. And of course, I had no idea at the time how it was put together, how quickly things were or happened. I didn't know the high mountain that I had to climb, but just from an image standpoint, just from a challenge standpoint, I thought, man, this is it. There is nothing I would rather do. At the same time, I thought, you know, I have directed every kind of show that Saturday Night Live makes fun of. I have directed a lot of live music. I have directed hours and hours of news. I can certainly direct comedy news, but I've done very little in terms of blocking, shooting, sketch comedy. Some of that in the Mike Douglas days, and I did some little things at some local stations that were sort of cute amateur versions of what Saturday Night Live is. But to direct 13 one-act plays from scratch, in addition to all of those other things, I thought, I'm not sure I can do that. And I'm not sure I want to take the chance of embarrassing myself and failing at this point in my career. I mean, I had put in my time. It had a pretty healthy and successful run. And I thought, why would I stick my neck out? Why would I take the risk of that kind of failure? Even though it was such a flattering opportunity and a challenging one, I thought, oh man, I don't think so. But then I realized that the worst emotion that human beings have, or one of the worst, is regret. And I thought, man, if I don't try it, a couple of years from now, I'll look back and I'll say, wow, man, maybe I could have done that, or why did I give that a shot, or the person who took over for Beth isn't that good anyhow. Man, oh man, I could have been a contender. And I thought, all right, I'm going to jump in, take that risk, and for the first time in years, feel butterflies in my stomach. I'm going to try to climb that mountain. And I thought, yeah, if I fail, I can always come back to doing morning television. I know how to do that. and it's worth a risk. Well, I am so glad I took that risk, and it was a steep climb, and the learning curve was remarkable, and there were moments when I thought I have no idea how to do this, and there were moments when I would say that, hey, somebody give me a hand here, I have no idea how to do this, but people would step up, offer a suggestion, help me through, and I am by far ended up with the best job I've ever had, by far the most challenging and rewarding, and I'm so glad I took that risk.
I think that, I always like to tell people that it's better to regret doing something than not doing something. And I think that, your story that you're saying is so important for our listeners to hear, because getting such a monumental job, it's easy to think, oh, I would just jump at the opportunity to work with all these major celebrities and in this monumental institution. But you're a human being, and you get nervous, and it's hard to make those crazy life changes, later on in your life. And I think that, your decision to go and do that, and how happy you are with the position, 15 years later, I think is a wonderful case study for all of our listeners to hear about.
Thank you. And I agree. And it could have easily ended differently, but I still would have been happy that I gave it a shot. And not only was I jumping into something I didn't know, but I was jumping into something where you're supposed to know, and where other people turn to you for answers. And it wasn't like I was showing up to paint scenery. I was showing up to answer questions and make decisions. And people who had been doing it for years and years turned to me and said, "What do you want here? How big should this be? Or what color do you want that set? Or where do you want the actors to move?" And I knew that there would be moments when I would not have answers, when I should have had answers. And there were moments like that, and there still are, actually. But I've gotten a chance to work with the people who are the best at what they do, and who are self-starters in many ways, and don't need my decisions about many, many things that I used to make the decisions about. And most importantly, I've been involved in a show that I think is important, and is more important than it's ever been. And it's not only made people laugh and clap and think, but it's also done some healing, and it's held some people accountable, and it's talked about, and it's valuable television. I heard Lorne Michaels say a couple of years ago, if this show ever becomes a nostalgia show that people watch because, oh, hey, we used to watch this in college, let's see what they're doing now. No, it's not as funny, but that was kind of cute. He said, if it's a nostalgia show they watch because of those memories, then it's time to end the show. He wants it to be every week just as cutting edged, as incisive, as talked about as ever. And I've never met anyone as driven and as dedicated to that kind of vision in my life, and therefore I'm even more proud to be a part of it.
You mentioned, Don, the people, and I'm wondering when you started, because it seems like Saturday Night Live, especially behind the scenes, is as much a family as it is a staff. And I'm wondering, you come in this very senior role into this family, many of whom who have been there for decades. How does that work, and how do you end up fitting in? And is there anyone that you remember reaching out a hand when you needed it early on to help you fit into the family dynamic of SNL?
You're absolutely right. That place is filled with remarkable, gifted people, many of whom have been there for a long, long time, and that's partly because I've never been anywhere where there's less turnover, and that's because it's the last show of its kind, and people who are good at it stay, and it's a fun place to be, and it's rewarding on almost every level of staff and crew. And so I would be dealing with a set designer who'd been there for 40 years. And he would say, are you sure you want to lay out the furniture that way? And my urge would be to say, well, I'm the director. Of course, that's the way I want. But I was fortunately mature enough by that time to say, I have no idea if that's what I want. What do you think? And that helped. But there's a camera operator who operates the crane. His name is John Pinto, and he has won in his career, I think, 24 Emmys. And he is just a genius with the most sensitive touch and just the understanding of how that camera works, how any camera works, and how to capture action. And I think it was my first or second show when in dress rehearsal or right after dress rehearsal, Lauren says, I've got an idea. I want Amy to finish up this commercial where she's playing sort of a drunk celebrity and doing a commercial at home base. And then right after that, we're going into another sketch, which is a bar scene. But here's what I want. I want the sketch to end or the commercial set to end and Amy get up and walk over and walk into the bar scene and then be a part of the bar scene. She wasn't written to be a character in that. They just wrote some lines for her to throw out as if she had just walked out of the commercial world into this bar. And I thought, number one, I have no idea how to make the transition. How am I going to get the cameras from the commercial set over to here? And in the meeting between the dress and air, I said that very thing. And John Pinto says, hey, Don, look, just stay with me. I'll just, on the crane, I'll just follow her over and I'll walk her right into the set and I'll land right in that center wide shot that I was going to start with that sketch anyhow. And it worked beautifully and it was seamless. And in my first show, here's this amazing transition following Amy Poehler from one set into the other. And it was only because John spoke up and I said, thank you. And that still happens to this day.
Well, Don, I think that, one of the things our listeners love to point out is that back in the 70s, when it was the original cast, one of the things that they would do is after a sketch was over, the camera would pan out. So you would see that this particular sketch was part of the live comedy show. And it would, you could see the crowd and you could see everything. And I noticed, some of that this season, even a little bit. Sometimes the sketch will finish and you guys will back out of the scene or the cast members will walk off the particular sketch. Right. And that's the type of stuff that we love. Like, give us more of that because we love to know that this is a live comedy show and it's not just, a set of a sketch that's just, the sketch ends and it goes to commercial. We love seeing stuff like that. And I love that was part of one of your first shows.
That was a transition in the middle. But what you referred to is at the end of a sketch. And sure enough, the past year and a half, but especially this season, I've been doing much more of that. And it's because I sat down and watched one of the old vintage shows. I said, oh, that's really cool. And I forgot that's how much fun that is to see and how the cast breaks character and you see the station hands rush in, you see cameras in the foreground, you pull out and you see Wally showing off with cue cards, knowing that he's on camera. And I wish I had started that 10 years ago instead of 2, because you're absolutely right. And I just say, all right, so at the end of the sketch, instead of that tape of the exterior of the apartment house, we're going to do an overshoot. And they know exactly what an overshoot means. And whoever is the last camera, you've got the overshoot. Or I'll use the crane, move the crane in over top and above them all. So he's got one shot in the sketch. That's the overshoot at the end.
I just wanted to ask because you had mentioned that you watched a vintage Saturday Night Live. So I was curious, how familiar are you with all of the old seasons of the show? Were you watching them when they had aired originally? And then was it like, oh, now that I got the job, I got to go and watch, 30, 25 seasons of Saturday Night Live that maybe I haven't seen every episode of?
I definitely was a fan at the beginning and certainly the first couple of years. In fact, the very first year I was directing a show downstairs called America Alive, which was a daytime talk show which was alive for about 6 months. But I was in the NBC complex and part of the NBC family when they started in '75. When I got the job, my responsibility, I was given the mandate to just make it seamless. And so what I really paid attention to was the past couple of Beth years, and did my best to match that look and that flow and that rhythm and that kind of blocking. And at that time, she wasn't, the overshoot thing had disappeared, or that was Davey Wilson's thing, and she had dropped it some time before. And as I said before, I wish I had returned to that sooner. But my emphasis was on watching the most recent years.
All I was going to say, comment about the overshoot, because I love it, and we may have said something, earlier this season about this, Don, is that it also sort of underscores a little bit of, in this season, sort of those COVID protocols. You can see the people with the masks. You can see if it's I mean, this isn't the overshoot thing, but when we've seen the back hallways a few times, we've seen how much of a ghost town it is with those protocols and everything. But it's one of those things that I think that, as John mentioned, the everybody really is excited to see, just that sort of behind the scene glimpse. But I was going to ask you this, because you were talking about just climbing that mountain when you first took on the show. You hear musicians and performers often talk about how those feelings of nerves never really go away. With time, it's just learning how to channel those feelings and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering, what is the feeling in the control room, in your tenure now, for you and maybe the team as it approaches airtime?
Because of the nature of the show and the last minute changes and how intense it is, I don't sense any lessening of the butterflies, and it's that same adrenaline rush every week, the way it was 15 years ago, and I like that.
I would say that has to be, and again, it's been said that you've directed probably more hours of live television than anyone. One other sort of follow-up comment or question was, when you mentioned the audience coming in, you guys are down the hall. The control room is sort of down the hall and away from all that action. How is it? I'm just curious. You've got to feel the energy of the live audience after, the days of blocking and rehearsal run-throughs, that when you have that dress rehearsal audience, that live audience, how does that energy, does that feel different when there's people in the building and you can hear them laughing, I imagine?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And not only hear them laughing, the dressing room for the band is they come through our side, our doors, not the center doors. So when they perform, all of their friends and family and roadies and staff and crew and management are standing right outside the control room. And so as they come out after their performance, you hear that swell of reception from them. And that's a nice feeling too. They just gave their all, and I did my best to capture it cleanly, and their friends and family loved it too.
Rich, why don't you go ahead with some of the questions you have? I know you have so many.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I'd love to sort of, because, we all know about 11:30 Saturday night. And as fans, we've heard a lot about the week, leading up to that from the writers and the cast perspective. I'm really interested, like, when does your week start? And what do you do? What's your beginning of your week? What does that look like? I'd love to hear a little bit up to, the rehearsals and the blocking of sort of where you enter into a Saturday Night Live episode in the beginning of the week.
Until this year, there was always a host meeting on Monday evening, and that meeting was in Warren's office with just the writers and me, and I think that's it. And it was, I think, a meeting primarily designed to scare the host, especially a first-time host, because the host would sit there and this 35 writers would pour in and jam in, sit on the floor and around every piece of furniture in Lorne's office. And then Lorne would call the writers one at a time, and they would each throw out an idea. And the host would sit there and nod and occasionally snicker and most often flinch, because one writer would say, okay, so in this sketch, you're going to play a male version of Marilyn Monroe. And then the next writer would say, so you're going to be Calvin Coolidge, and go all the way through the room where 25 people would throw out random ideas, most of which never evolved into sketches. I think designed just to scare the host, and to think, oh my God, what did I get myself into? How am I going to? I have to play bagpipes. I don't know how to play. Well, that meeting went away because of COVID, and it's been replaced by a Tuesday meeting, which will happen tomorrow, with just the writers and not even Lorne. I don't think, just the writers and the host. And as a result, to answer your question, I do nothing on Mondays and Tuesdays.
Okay.
I walk in Wednesday, and what used to happen is I would walk in, there'd be a pile of 40 sketches on my desk, and I would spend the next couple of hours reading those 40 sketches and doing real rough blocking, or questioning whether this possibly can be done at all, and say, wait a minute, this is written as a field piece. This can't be done live. And then we would go into the read-through, which now starts at 4:00 in the afternoon. Used to be in one room where the entire cast and the host and Lorne and I would sit around the big table, and the rest of the room would be filled with staff and all the writers, serving as kind of a pseudo audience. And we would read these 40 sketches, script in hand. We now do that in the studio so that we can spread out, again for COVID reasons, and just tables and people, some sitting up in the bleachers as well. And we spend hours reading sketches, script in hand. And then Lorne, when that ends 4 or 5 hours later, Lorne narrows it down to the actual 10 or 12 we plan to mount. And then I take those selected scripts into a different room, and for the first time, turn it over to the set designers and the hair and makeup people and the wardrobe people and the special effects people, and they start from scratch Wednesday night. Now, sometimes they'll say, "Oh, well, this is going to be in the Oval Office." Well, we've got that, but most of the time it's, okay, what's this suburban living room going to look like? Or this is a school, but it's a school for people who are 7 feet tall, and they just scatter to design sets and find props and begin to order special effects and puppets, and that's the self-starting part of that operation that I mentioned before. They just scatter and do it. And then we come in Thursday, rehearse the guest band, and rehearse some of the simple sketches that don't need full special stuff or props that where we can use rehearsal blocks and just fake scenery and some old furniture, and just so we can block basic talk shows or basic game shows. And then come back in Friday, and now there's a lot more to play with. We rehearse all the rest of the sketches, each get about an hour's work. I rehearse it on the floor first and block it, and then block it with the cameras. And about an hour is what most need. Some need a little more, some less. And Friday night, by the time we've run through everything, we now have a cold open that we can at least talk about, and we'll rehearse the monologue as well. Walk in Saturday, and that room is just filled with restaurants and amazing furniture and special stuff that's been built, and flying ghosts, and And I look around and say, wow, look, who, this looks exactly like a high school in Chicago. And who found all these desks and who put that bell on the wall and who decorated this to make it look just like a real high school? I don't really know, but it just happens that way, and it pops up, and just those brilliant artists make it work.
Oh,
we rehearse every sketch through Saturday. Each gets a quick run through, now in full makeup and wardrobe, and with for the first time, lower third and some graphics and some videotape and stuff that we never had the past 2 days. And we rehearse the rest of the sketches, take a break, come back, do weekend update, and then fly with a dress rehearsal at 8 o'clock. And then change it all. And that dress rehearsal will be 40 minutes more material than we really need, just so Lauren has the ability to pick and choose and cut and slice and move stuff around. And that's what happens between dress and hair.
Wow.
And inevitably at 11 o'clock, I'm in the control room meeting with the camera operators, saying, oh, this sketch, kill shots 24 and 28 and 29, a 2-shot and not a 3-shot. And then camera 6, wait a minute. Keenan's not even in this anymore. What happened to Keenan? And this ending is different. How are we going to do a different ending? Oh, wait a minute. You got to get out there, guys. Okay, I'll give you the changes in a commercial break. We got to fly. And then we fly, and the plane takes off, and sometimes the ride is bumpy, but it always lands at 1 a.m. And inevitably I'll look back and say, Lauren was right. That sketch was funnier after Weekend Update, and it was funnier without that character, and all of those changes made sense. I just got tired of saying it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could only imagine. It's really just like a magical process that it gets, from point A to point Z. And I think that like there's nothing that really was displayed it even more so when you did some of those crazy or when you did the crazy anniversary show for the 40th. And James, I know you had a question for Don about the 40th anniversary, so let me bring you in to ask him about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's been what, 5 or 6 years now, but I think that, people in the fan community, still point to that, that 40th anniversary show is one of the biggest nights in TV comedy, and can you tell us just a little bit about what you remember about the process involved in preparing, for that special versus, a typical 90-minute episode?
When I first started, they said, this is a well-oiled machine, and these people know exactly how to do this, and they helped through, and that was all true. But I was also told, flinch when you hear the word special, because everything is out of order, and nobody knows exactly who does what when. The schedule changes, and people come in from the past who come in to schmooze and to chat about old times, and they forget how hard it is, and they forget that rehearsals have to happen at certain times, and it's a nightmare trying to wrangle all of those old cast members. And specials like we did the 25th and like we did the 30th, I guess, were just crazy. And so when they said, okay, it's 40th anniversary time, I flinched, but it wasn't bad. It was different. It was different in so many ways, including the fact that we jammed audience onto the floor, much bigger bleachers, and filled up spaces that we usually use for booms and cameras and the crane. But so we had to work around all of that. Plus, we ran out of space. We were doing 3 music acts, and we used up the music space for Paul McCartney, and we had someone at home base, and we had, at any rate, out of nowhere, the week of the show, I guess it was Maya Rudolph came in saying, hey, we want to do a sketch where we bring back all of the great musical characters from over the years. And everyone from Steve Martin's Pharaoh to the piano guy and to Frank Sinatra, and I said, "Well, that's a great idea. We have no place to put any of those people." And there were at least eight different performances that were planned in one sketch to bounce around. Well, we found places for them, and we made it work. And it was a joy to do that show. We all wore tuxedos in the control room, and it was we knew it was special right from the cold open.
I think from top to bottom, it's just one of the most solid, evenings, and it was not short, but one of the things I thought was interesting was the decision to make for the 40th to place that special, on a Sunday in the middle of the season, where I believe the 15th and the 25th anniversary shows kicked off the season. The premiere was the following week, I think. Just wondering now where we are, John, is there any buzz yet about any 50th anniversary as we're heading, ready to close out season 46 now?
If there is, I haven't been buzzed. But
that's fair.
I guess that's a decision solely up to Mr. Michaels, and we'll sit back and wait.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. I mean, I think that the 40th anniversary special was probably, as a viewer, one of the greatest nights of my life. Getting to watch that, let alone being there, I'm sure was incredible. So to anticipate and see what's going to happen for the 50th anniversary and potentially the 1000th episode of the show, which would be around 50 years from when the show started in the first place. I think those things are just, as an SNL super fan, you dream of these moments. So I can't wait for that a few years down the road. So that's super exciting. So I had some questions. I'm sure Rich and I'm sure James have some more things to ask you, but I did have a couple of listeners send in some questions that I just wanted to get a chance to ask you while we have you. One of them was, on a week like this week, where we have a host in Elon Musk who the internet and certain people find is a little bit more on the controversial side, does that become a little bit more of a challenge for you in the production area of things, where you hear this guy is coming in and regardless of his status outside of SNL, he has to come in and be like any other host that enters the show and, work with the writers and work with the cast? And is there ever a point where you hear someone like an Elon Musk is going to come in to host the show and it's like, ooh, okay, this one's going to be really interesting?
For me, the responsibility and the challenges are exactly the same. And it will depend on his flexibility, his comic timing, his willingness to try things, and whether he has any breadth of characters he can do. And it has nothing to do with outside buzz. Yes, that definitely affects the talent people and the promotion people, and sure, Lauren is questioned about it significantly. It doesn't affect us at all. When during the elections, 2 elections ago, we were told that Donald Trump was going to host. And my reaction was, oh, man, the guy's in the middle of a presidential campaign. He definitely is not going to be able to give us the kind of time we need. He'll probably have a couple of hours rehearsal, if anything, and that'll be restricted by what he's allowed to do or what he's willing to do. This is going to be a nightmare week. Donald Trump was there more than most hosts. He just sat in the studio. He just sat in the studio instead of running back to his dressing room like most do. He just sat there waiting for the next thing, and he was willing to do anything. Now, I won't claim that he was really good at it, but that had nothing to do with who he was or what he was doing or the controversy around his hosting. And I think it's going to be the same this week. I have no idea what performing experience Mr. Musk has, but apparently Lorne believes he's got something to offer. And there are people who have said the announcement that he was going to host is probably going to get a bigger laugh than anything in the show.
That's great.
I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just willing to give him a shot and see what he's got. I've been shocked by how good sports stars are. I think, man, they have no acting experience. How are they going to come? Well, there have been some great ones. Man, both Manning brothers were terrific, and almost all of them have had something to offer. And I came to the conclusion, well, yeah. First of all, they're so comfortable in who they are that they say, oh, yeah, sure, I'll put on a skirt. I don't care. And they're used to playing with a team. They're used to playing in front of a crowd. They're used to being coached by a director of sorts, and they take direction well. And so I've been pleasantly surprised by sports guys, and maybe I will be by computer guys too.
I think either way, it's going to be interesting. So I know that, you're expressing the same thing. You're just interested to see what's going to happen. And I think we all are, whether you agree with it or not, you're excited to see what is going to happen on Saturday. So thank you for answering that. Rich, let me send it over to you.
You talked about the guests, because you're right. And we've seen great, musicians who've come on and just their first time just crushed it and great. Is there any commonality? You were saying about teams, but like what makes a good guest host? Is there something about their personality or willingness? Like when you're watching the table read and you're seeing these people for the first time, there are any qualities that you notice in the people who are really good at this, or is there anything that you try to bring out of guest hosts if you're not feeling like it's gonna work as well as you'd hope?
Mm-hmm. The answer to the first part is yes. I can tell in read through which ones are playing it what their image of a sketch character actor is, and which ones just sort of naturally slip into the role of playing somebody else. And there's a big difference in serious actors and comedians and how they treat the material. But someone who's inexperienced, I can tell right away that whether they have the spark that will make them comfortable in playing other people. The second part of your question, though, I thought when I started that I would have responsibility for real character development and directing like a film director does. It turns out that isn't my mandate much at all. To some degree, I certainly do all of the physical blocking to make sure they physically do what I need them to do. But characterization or pace or the size of characters they play, that responsibility is given to the writers. And part of that is because it's the writer's vision from the beginning. The writer wrote this material with an idea in mind of who this character is and how he sounds and how he moves and how quickly he speaks. And it's also that I'm responsible for 12 one-act plays, and that writer is responsible for just his vision. And so that kind of directing, that kind of character directing is given up to writers. And I know a lot about it and was a pretty serious actor myself for a while. But I was reluctantly, but understandably given up that role.
I was going to ask you, Don, is there anything that you really want to do at the show that you haven't done so far, that by, the time you move on from the show, you're like, oh, I just want to make sure I do that one thing first?
In terms of direction and cameras, there have been lots of things that pop up that I think, oh man, I could easily put my stamp on this. This is the kind of thing that I love to show off. But I've finally realized that if my work gets noticed, it's at the service of the material. It's my job to present all the work, including the musical performances, in a way that makes the person at home say, oh man, that's funny, or that's a great song. If that person at home is saying, whoa man, there's a terrific shot, then I have not done my job. I've done just the opposite. I've distracted from the work. So the answer to your question is no, I will not intrude my vision on the work itself. However, there were times when sketches would be written where the host or someone would go into the control room and talk to the director. And I've been planning for that and rehearsing for that for 15 years.
Okay, so you just read my mind. This is on my list right now because I was going to say to you, Don, that I wanted to put myself in the mindset of a cast member, and you're the host, and this is a Monday night meeting, and I'm pitching to you my pitch, and my pitch to you is going to be that back in the 70s and into the 80s, that's what happened with Davey Wilson, right? You know, you'd have your host on home base, yes, and he'd say, "Hey, Davey," and then you'd hear this, like on the voice of God, Davey would come on and would basically say, like, yes, talk directly to the host. And I've been waiting for that from you, Don. I want to see it. I want to see the host walk off home base and walk into the control room.
So do I.
The closest thing we've gotten have been those occasional teasers, you know, during the commercials where we see you guys like right before a Weekend Update or whatever it is.
There was one. Let me correct you. There was one time when a host, I can't remember who it was, a woman who had become a director, and she was sort of showing off how she had learned the skill set. And I interjected something over the intercom. And between dress and air, Lauren tried to kill that. And she said, "Oh no, I really like that. I want that in." That's the only way I managed to be heard once. Although I still get after residuals from it. But you're absolutely right. And I remember a time when some host walked into the control room and looking for Lauren, and Davey Wilson stopped him and said, "Oh, he's right down the hall. His office is just 2 doors down." He said, "By the way, you know when you're doing that sketch, that next sketch, the one about the policeman, could you be just funnier, funnier. That's all." And the guy, okay, baby, I'll try that. Well, it was terrific delivery. It was terrific. It was a terrific moment for Davey Wilson, but I haven't yet had mine.
All right, Don. Well, if we see Elon Musk this week go into the control, yeah, exactly. If we see Elon Musk go into the control room, I want a little bit of credit over here. So that's.
I'll give Rich, you part of the residuals too.
Exactly. Rich, let me send it back over to you.
Is there, I'm wondering, in the show, I mean, imagine as funny as SNL is, while it's happening, it's got to be super stressful and a lot of adrenaline. But I'm wondering, is there any character, any sketch, any actor who will actually get you to laugh even during the show when you're calling cameras and it's super high intensity? Is there anything that still kind of tickles you?
By the time we hit air, I've heard that material 10 times. Occasionally a line will change because of the changes between dress and air. Will catch me off guard. There are times during Weekend Update when something hits hard and I am surprised at the audience reaction. And I've never missed the next shot as a result. But, and just the fact that that audience is loving something that I have heard 5 times makes me happy and occasionally amused enough to let out a little guffaw.
Are there any kinds of sketches that are more intimidating from a production? Like I'm thinking of like monologues where, you know, the host is going around the back and it's all steady cam, or are there any types of sketches where you see him at the table read and you're like, oh guys, you're killing me. Come on.
By the way, give us those. We love that stuff. That's the best stuff.
Love it. Love it.
Every week there's something like that. And every week I think this is going to be such a nightmare to mount for any number of reasons. I think that because the cast is so big, there is a major effort to include more and more characters, more and more cast members in every sketch. So what used to be a dinner with one person at the head of the table and 2 couples on the sides now becomes 4 couples and the hosts are 2 couples. And that's just so difficult to set up properly and make sure that you can see everybody. And then if there's any action to it as well, where somebody's going to burst in the door and set the curtains on fire, it just adds to the potential disaster primarily the disaster of missing a shot or trapping a punchline off camera. But from a selfie standpoint, I love it when it's contained, and even the speed at which a game show happens. At least I know nobody's going to move around, or very rarely, and so I know what I'm locked into, and I'm comfortable with just keeping up with the action, even with graphic changes and lower third stuff and sound effects, and that stuff is fine for me. But as soon as it's a big crowd moving around or doing something that is interrelated and it's got to be choreographed, I still wince a little bit. Yeah.
Rich, James, do you have any more for Don? I do have a closing questions I want to ask him. And Don, obviously, you've been so generous with your time, so I'm so appreciative. But before I get to it, Rich, James, if you have anything else on your end.
No, I was just going to ask, and I don't know if there's a typical answer here for this, Don, but if we're watching at home live and, a commercial break is certainly not a break for you, I would imagine. The home audience is probably getting up and running to the fridge to grab something to drink or eat. What is it that you're typically, you're just going through that script, I imagine, for whatever changes as you're preparing for the next sketch as you come back? Is that?
Yeah, I think probably my strongest attribute as a director is focus and concentration, and I can stay pretty tightly tuned straight through. And there are times when people say, Paul Simon was in the control room the whole time watching it from the back row. Never had any idea, never noticed, because I can stay pretty concentrated.
So is it pretty much that prep, that concentration on what we're doing next during the commercial break? Just curious.
Yeah, especially since during the air show that I may be handed script changes for what's coming up, especially if we're 5 or 6 minutes over and we're trying to our best to edit the final sketch so that it's going to fit, and then I'll be handed a script with handwritten lines and stuff crossed out, and have to try somehow to get that information to the crew. So yeah, there's not much time for drinking vitamin water.
It's all just fascinating. It's all fascinating.
Rich.
Yeah, my last question, just we haven't talked much about musical guests, which is such a big part of the show. And I think what we've noticed is I feel like in the last few years, the performances have really gone from a band just standing in front of the Grand Central set to much more elaborate and inventive productions for such a small space. I know that that's probably coming a lot from the musicians, but was that an effort on your part or the show's part? And how does that affect what you have to do to actually shoot it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The fact is, it's happened not because of me, but kind of in spite of me. My feeling for years was that what made musical performances on Saturday Night Live special is that they were clearly in the Saturday Night Live space, and it was sort of like unplugged. Not unplugged musically, but unplugged visually. That no matter what they are used to doing in a big arena, or their music videos, they come in here and it's sort of the bare naked performance of that song in the Saturday Night Live look. And I love that. And I thought that you say, well, man, that really is a pretty song. I never noticed with all the glitz around the way they do it in a stadium or at a music video. And I love that and was kind of disappointed that it had already started to get away from the show when I started, and I don't know how, or I don't know who's responsible, but we clearly let it happen. And as soon as it happened once, the next person says, "Well, like Kanye West changed the back wall, and you brought in a lighting designer for that group," and so it has really, really gone pretty far. And I guess you could say, well, keep it up with the times, or that's what people are used to seeing now, and let the performer do what he or she wants to, so that's in his look and feel and genre. And so we've definitely done that. And to me, we cannot recreate a music video, so it's going to either look like a cheap version of a music video if you try to do it live, and you might as well run the music video and then come back and have them take bows on stage. So I've opposed it a little bit, but I haven't had much support for that opposition, and we give in to what they ask for. Now, what they ask for oftentimes makes it really a major production, and who was it? We spun the set around entirely a couple of years ago. Who was that?
Oh yeah.
Well,
it was a female artist where she was in the cube, and the camera was
well, I think you did something really cool with Halsey. I remember.
Yes, Halsey. I think that's who it might have been. Yeah.
No, it wasn't Halsey, although we did some stuff with Halsey too. I'll think of it. But this was a premiere 2-3 years ago, and I got word 2 weeks before we were start that she wanted to do this Fred Astaire effect. Fred Astaire walked on the walls and walked on the ceiling and walked in a movie, and it's a great special effect where he walks around a room, and I said, well, that's a nightmare to do properly, and I wasn't even sure how it was done. We figured it out, or they figured it out, and it worked fine. It was kind of cool. But I said, but the fact is, even if it works perfectly, people at home aren't going to say, "Man, that's a great song, and she's a terrific singer." They're going to say, "How did they do that? Man, she walked on the walls and she walked on the ceiling. I'm not sure this is what you want." But it happened, and somebody else is going to want to do that again probably this week.
I think we're referring. Yeah, that was really Billie English. I think is what we're
Billie Eilish.
Yes, that's who it was. Billie Eilish.
Yeah,
right.
Billie
Eilish.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. All this was really fascinating to hear from you, Don. I guess where I would like to kind of finish off the conversation is you've been at the show for about, 15 years. We talked about how monumental this season is given everything that's happening in the world and your journey through the show. When you decide to move on from the show eventually, have you thought about, what you want to be remembered for as, one of the 4 directors ever in the history of the show? Is there, something that you would like to convey to the listeners about like, hey, this was the Don Roy King era and, have some words to explain why?
I take pride in one thing. There is, for the first time in the history of Saturday Night Live, there's a pencil sharpener in the control room. And the reason is Beth, there's so many changes and there's so much erasing done. Beth would use a mechanical pencil, and she would just open it up and write, and open it up again and write. And she had to change something. She'd drop the pencil and pick up this great little sponge eraser and erase it. And she said, this is the most important thing I can tell you. Get yourself a mechanical pencil and this kind of eraser. Well, I tried it and I just could not get into the habit of picking up and turning, putting it down and picking up the eraser and erasing it. And then I said, where did I put the pencil? And I had this eraser. And oh man. So to me, it's just write, erase, write, stick my pencil in the pencil sharpener. And I'm so proud. It's an electric pencil. It's an electric pencil sharpener. And when I leave, I want it to have my name on it.
As you should. That's a great story. I think you're going to inspire a lot of young directors to get their own pencil sharpeners now. Don, thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really it's such an honor to get to hear everything, all the stories. I'm sure that you have a million more, and I really hope that we get to chat with you again in the future.
My pleasure, John. Anytime. And Rich and James, you guys were fabulous and know more about the show than I do, but I enjoyed rambling on. Thank you.
My pleasure. And Don, if you don't mind, I'm just going to close out the show with a couple plugs. So Rich, where can people reach out to you?
Twitter at Rich Tack is the best way to say hello.
Perfect. And we'll be seeing you on a roundtable coming up. James, thank you for joining us. Where can everybody reach out to you?
I am on Facebook. I'm on Twitter as SNL James and Instagram JP Stevens Jr.
And if you would like to get more from SNL Stats, please subscribe to us on YouTube or on any podcatcher to never miss a show. We had some really fun shows in the last couple of weeks. We had a By the Numbers show, which I don't know if you know what that is, but basically we have developed a ranking system for appearances and screen time for some of the cast members. So we had some analytics experts come on in and tell us which of the cast members are doing great on the show this season, which was really fun to go through. So that was really great.
It's fun depending on whether you're a cast member and where you rank on that list.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was really fun. We also had a superfan takeover. We had some of our superfans talk about their favorite impressions from the history of the show. We will have some roundtables covering the next 3 episodes, a little bonus coverage in there, as well as a live show right after the finale. We will be live on YouTube to break everything down. You can join us in the chat and talk about that. So much fun stuff coming up as we head towards the end of the season. So Don, I wish you the best of luck to end season 46. I wish you good health with everything that is happening and hope you enjoy your summer ahead, and we look forward to hopefully speaking to you sometime in the future. So for everybody, my name is Jon Schneider from SNL Stats. We'll see you next time.
But we're here for the numbers as well. So let's get statistical, so unpredictable here on SNL Stats.